Imagine this. Billions of light years away, far beyond what even our most advanced telescopes can clearly see, there's a strange, silent void, so vast and empty that it defies everything we thought we knew about space. This isn't just a regular patch of cold interstellar gas or an undepopulated region of the cosmos. No, this is something else. Something deeply unsettling. It's called the cold spot, and it's colder than any other part of the observable universe. Astronomers first thought it was a fluke, maybe a data error, or just a random statistical anomaly. But as they looked deeper, the truth became far more eerie and mind-bending. What if this void isn't just empty space? What if it's a scar, left behind from a cosmic collision with something unimaginably huge, something that doesn't belong in our universe? What if this cold spot is actual evidence of another universe brushing up against our own? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to get the answer to the question that brought you here. And trust me, it's going to blow your mind. Now, I know you've probably watched videos that start strong and fade into science jargon or speculation without ever giving you what you came for. But this isn't one of those. This story is different because it's real. It's grounded in actual discoveries, strange cosmic microwave background readings, and questions that even NASA and the European Space Agency can't fully answer. I'm not just going to dump a pile of science data on you. I'm going to take you inside the mystery. We're going to explore the scientists who first spotted the anomaly, the wild theories it sparked, and the shocking recent developments that suggest we might be living in a multiverse. That's right, multiverse. One of the most searched and trending concepts right now across YouTube and science communities. This isn't a Marvel movie concept anymore. This is starting to look like a real possibility. And the cold spot might be our first solid clue. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had that moment when you looked up at the night sky and just felt small? That strange emotional pull when you realize how vast the universe is? That's not just wonder. That's your brain reacting to the unknown. And this cold spot taps into that same emotion on a cosmic scale. I want you to feel that mystery, that sense that something isn't quite right out there. Because that's where we're going, to the edges of what we understand, into a void so strange and silent it challenges the very foundation of modern physics. And here's the twist. It might not even be empty at all. It could be the place where another reality touched ours, for just a split second, before vanishing into the infinite black. Think about that. Two universes colliding. Two different sets of physical laws crashing into each other like a cosmic car wreck. And we're left with the only piece of evidence, a spot so cold, so quiet, that it might be hiding the biggest secret in the cosmos. You see, the cold spot isn't just cold. It's too cold. That's what set off alarm bells. The universe, ever since the Big Bang, has been gradually cooling down. But the cosmic microwave background, essentially the universe's baby picture, shows us what that cooling looks like everywhere. There's a kind of pattern to it, like the ripples on a pond. And then there's the cold spot. It's like someone took a paintbrush and smeared black ink across an otherwise balanced canvas. At first, scientists thought it was a statistical hiccup, but they checked again, and again. And every time, the cold spot was still there. Still cold. Still empty. Still wrong. But here's where it gets even weirder, and this is where you'll start to see the story shift from space mystery to something that sounds more like science fiction but is rooted in real, peer-reviewed research. In 2007, a team of astronomers decided to look into the cold spot, hoping to find a galaxy cluster or a cloud of dark matter that might explain it. But what they found, or more accurately, what they didn't find, only deepened the mystery. No galaxies. No dust. No radiation sources. Just a massive void. A void that's 1.8 billion light-years wide. To put that in perspective, that's like taking every galaxy you can see in the night sky and deleting them. This thing shouldn't exist. And yet it does. Why? Some researchers, like Dr. Laura Mersini-Houghton, a cosmologist who's no stranger to controversial theories, proposed something radical. What if this wasn't a natural part of our universe at all? What if the cold spot is the aftermath of a collision with another universe? That's right, two universes slamming into each other like tectonic plates in a multiverse. The cold spot could be the bruise left behind. Suddenly, we're not talking about just a strange area of space. We're talking about proof of something much bigger, much stranger, and far more terrifying. Now let's talk about the psychological side. You and I were wired to find patterns. It's how we survive. Our brains are built to connect dots, even when there's nothing there. But what happens when there is something there, something real, and our brains can't explain it? That's what makes the cold spot so powerful. It taps into that deep psychological tension between curiosity and fear. You want to know the truth, but a part of you dreads it, because what if that truth changes everything? That's what this story does. And that's why you need to stay until the very end. Because we're going all the way, from the discovery of the anomaly to the wildest interpretations, to the brand new satellite data just released in the last few years that might finally offer a terrifying answer. And here's the real kicker. While mainstream science has been cautious, some would say too cautious, about declaring the cold spot as multiverse evidence, there's a growing body of research from cosmologists and quantum physicists that suggests our universe might not be alone. If the multiverse theory is true, then our universe could be just one bubble in a vast foam of realities. Some are like ours, some are completely alien. And the cold spot? That could be the place where two of those bubbles touched. Maybe just for a moment. Maybe more than once. And what's waiting on the other side could be beyond human comprehension. I want you to picture something. You're standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon at night. You can't see the bottom. You can't see the other side. Just darkness, silence, and a feeling in your chest that something enormous is just out of reach. That's the cold spot. That's what it feels like to look into it. Even seasoned scientists have admitted it gives them chills. And when I say that we might be staring into a wound left by a parallel universe, I'm not exaggerating. The physics backs it up. The data supports it. And the implications are almost too big to process. Because if this is true, if we're living in just one of infinite universes, then everything we know about reality changes. And the cold spot is the crack in the curtain. But wait, there's more. You might be wondering, why haven't we heard more about this? Why isn't it on the front page of every news site? The truth is, it's a slow burn. This story isn't about one big explosive reveal. It's a gradual, creeping realization. Like watching shadows move where there shouldn't be any. That's why this video matters. Because we're pulling all the pieces together, the data, the theories, the minds behind the discoveries, and building a picture that will leave you questioning everything. And the deeper you go, the harder it gets to look away. Because once you've seen the cold spot for what it really is, you can't unsee it. So here's my promise to you. By the time we're done, you'll understand not just what the cold spot is, but why it matters. You'll know the names of the scientists risking their careers to pursue the truth. You'll see how the latest telescopes are being aimed straight at the anomaly. And you'll learn why some experts believe that this could be the first direct evidence of a multiverse. This is real. This is happening. And if you've ever wondered whether we're truly alone in the cosmos, or if there's something, or someone, watching us from beyond the veil, then you need to hear what comes next. Because just when you think you've wrapped your head around it, something new comes to light. A new satellite reading. A new void inside the void. Or even a signal. And trust me, once you hear about that, there's no turning back. The cold spot is calling. And what's hiding inside it might not be from here. It all started with a man named Dr. Ethan Kessler, a soft-spoken astrophysicist from Colorado who spent the better part of his life staring into the silence of space, not out of professional duty, but out of an obsession that most of his peers found unsettling. He wasn't interested in supernovas or black holes like everyone else. His attention had always been drawn to the parts of the universe that offered nothing. No light, no mass, no motion. Just absence. And for the last 6 years, that absence had a name. The cold spot. While the rest of the scientific community moved on, publishing safe papers and feeding grants into well-worn projects, Ethan couldn't let it go. He started traveling, quietly and without fanfare, to observatories in Chile, Hawaii, even remote stations in Antarctica, gathering as much raw data as possible. His wife, Lena, A climatologist with a warm smile and a sharp intellect tried to support him at first. But Ethan's obsession with the void began to eat away at their marriage. He would stay up all night poring over deep space microwave readings and strange fluctuations in cosmic radiation. He wasn't just trying to understand the cold spot anymore. He was convinced it was watching back. People around him began to notice the change. His research assistant, Marcus Reyes, said Ethan started locking away files, encrypting data with passwords no one else had access to, even within the team. He grew paranoid, secretive, suspicious of everyone, including Marcus, who'd been with him since grad school. He stopped attending conferences. He shut down his social media. He cut off contact with half his colleagues. Then, 2 months ago, he vanished. No word. No trace. No warning. Lena was the one who reported him missing. According to her, Ethan had grown increasingly erratic in the final weeks before his disappearance. He spoke in riddles. He kept muttering about crossing the veil and how the cold spot wasn't a place but a door. She didn't understand what he meant at the time, but what scared her most was what she found in his study the night he disappeared. A journal filled with symbols, coordinates, and long passages that didn't seem written by someone entirely in their right mind. At the top of the last page, in Ethan's shaky handwriting, were 4 words: "It's not from here." That's when investigators entered the picture. At first, the case was treated like any other missing persons report. But the deeper they dug into Ethan's recent activity, the more troubling it became. He'd withdrawn large sums of cash, booked flights to obscure locations under aliases, and purchased strange pieces of high-frequency radio equipment from international suppliers. One package that hadn't been opened yet arrived from Uzbekistan, of all places, labeled only Deep Cosmic Resonance Plates. It didn't make sense. Ethan wasn't a field agent. He was a theorist, a desk scientist. And yet, he was acting like he was preparing for something. Or running from something. Investigators interviewed Lena multiple times, but she was genuinely in the dark. The only clue she had was a voice message Ethan left on her phone 2 days before he vanished. His voice was shaky, like he'd been crying. He told her not to look for him, that she needed to forget the cold spot. "If I succeed," he said, "you'll know. If I don't, it'll come through." Now here's where things get even more complicated. Just 1 week after Ethan vanished, strange anomalies started appearing in the data from the South Pole telescope, specifically irregular gravitational waves and temperature dips centered near the cold spot's coordinates. It was as if something massive, yet invisible, had brushed through our universe again. Several scientists brushed it off as coincidence. Space is unpredictable, after all. But not everyone agreed. Dr. Neela Mohan, a rising theoretical physicist from MIT, noticed a pattern. She compared the new data to a small anomaly she had recorded 3 years earlier, which she had dismissed at the time as noise. But now, the signatures matched. Almost exactly. It was like watching ripples from a stone no one saw fall. She tried reaching out to Ethan, only to discover he was missing. That's when she reached out to Marcus, who admitted he had copies of Ethan's earlier research, unencrypted backups he wasn't supposed to have. What he showed her changed everything. Inside the files were diagrams, hand-drawn overlays mapping the cold spot's temperature gradient not as a natural void, but as something symmetrical. It looked manufactured, even artificial. More disturbingly, Ethan had added annotations suggesting that the cold spot wasn't stationary, that it had shifted just slightly over the last 2 decades. If true, that would mean it wasn't a fixed point in the universe. It was moving. Marcus dismissed it as the ramblings of a desperate mind. But Neela wasn't so sure. She took the data to an independent lab, run by a controversial but brilliant astronomer named Hal Richter, known for promoting fringe theories about interdimensional travel. Hal was skeptical at first. He'd made a career out of chasing cosmic ghosts, and he'd been burned by bad data more than once. But this time it was different. The math lined up. The pattern was repeating. And it was heading straight toward a dense cluster of dark matter 11 billion light-years away. At this point, the theories started getting out of hand. Some believed Ethan had discovered a natural wormhole, a theoretical Einstein-Rosen bridge. through which energy, or even information, could pass between universes. Others claimed the cold spot was a leftover impression from the inflationary period of the early universe, a sort of bruise from where another bubble of reality had briefly collided with ours. But Hal suggested something far more chilling. The cold spot wasn't evidence of a past collision. It was a beacon, a signal, and something was responding. Now this is where we start introducing layers of uncertainty. Because just as investigators and scientists began working together to piece together Ethan's trail, rumors started surfacing. A security guard at an old observatory in the Atacama Desert reported seeing a man who looked like Ethan, only he was emaciated, confused, and barefoot, speaking in languages no one recognized. By the time local authorities arrived, the man was gone. Another sighting came from a pilot who claimed he picked up a distress signal on an outdated shortwave channel, broadcasting a single phrase over and over in Morse code. "Void is alive. Void is watching." The pilot dismissed it as interference until he realized the frequency was an exact match for the cold spot's microwave reading. It's at this point the line between science and something much darker begins to blur. Ethan's files contained what some are calling red herrings and others believe are intentional distractions. Cryptic references to ancient star maps, old Sumerian glyphs that oddly resemble the heat patterns found in the cold spot, and diary entries where Ethan claimed he could hear voices when looking at telescope data for too long. Was he losing his grip on reality? Or was he being led somewhere, guided, even by something that doesn't operate on human terms? As Neela and Hal dig deeper, they realize that not all of Ethan's research was his own. Some of the work appears to have been copied from a file buried deep in a long-abandoned Soviet-era space program database. How he got access is still unknown. But what's more shocking is the date, 1984. The file contains early radio scans of deep space anomalies eerily similar to the cold spot, recorded decades before it was discovered by modern science. The Russians knew something. And now it seems Ethan found out too late. So now we're left with more questions than answers. Did Ethan really vanish voluntarily? Was he on the edge of a breakthrough? Or did he uncover something that forced him to disappear? And why are so many of the people who get too close to the cold spot either vanishing or breaking down under pressure? Is this just a coincidence? Or is the cold spot doing something to them? The data shows subtle shifts in gravitational balance, minor time distortions in radiation readings, barely noticeable, but consistent. Like a ripple spreading outward, warping everything in its path. But perhaps the most disturbing clue so far is a satellite photo recovered from one of Ethan's encrypted hard drives, time-stamped just 4 hours before he went missing. It shows the cold spot, enhanced with spectral imaging filters, and at the very center, a shape. A symmetrical, ring-like structure, so faint it almost blends with the background noise. But it's there. Something no one had seen before. Or maybe something we were never meant to see. And here's where we have to ask the hardest question of all. What if the cold spot isn't a place or a phenomenon? What if it's a presence? Whatever it is, it's moving. It's changing. And according to Ethan's last recorded prediction, it's coming closer. Just when it seemed like Neela and Hal were beginning to piece together a timeline, some vague but promising map of Ethan's movements and discoveries, the momentum came to a grinding halt. Without warning, their shared research drive, which held Ethan's decrypted files and early cold spot imagery, was remotely wiped in the middle of the night.
Gone.
Every last diagram, encrypted note, and annotated image vanished without a trace. They tried to recover it, even brought in a cybersecurity expert from Los Angeles who specialized in military-grade data retrieval, but it was no use. The deletion wasn't sloppy, it was surgical.
Clean.
Too clean. Like someone had been watching, waiting for just the right moment to strike. Hal was furious. Neela was shaken. They didn't know who did it, but they now had proof that someone, maybe a government entity, maybe a foreign intelligence group, maybe something worse, was monitoring their investigation. And that meant the cold spot wasn't just a scientific curiosity anymore. It was a threat. One worth covering up. Then came the warning. Neela found a manila envelope on the windshield of her car, parked just outside her Boston apartment. No return address. Inside was a printed photo of her at the lab, time-stamped just 2 days earlier. Underneath it, written in red marker, were 6 words: "Stop digging, or you'll disappear too." It felt like something out of a Netflix thriller, but this was real. No digital footprint. No security footage. Nothing. It didn't make sense. She wasn't famous. She wasn't even publishing yet. But someone knew what she was doing. Someone was following her. And they were getting nervous. Hal, ever the cynic, believed the threat was from a human source, maybe a buried Cold War initiative, or a black-budget project the government never shut down. He started digging into old DARPA contracts, abandoned military space research, and quietly contacted a former NSA analyst he'd known during his early career. That's when they found something nobody was expecting. In 1996, there had been a classified project, codenamed Glass Horizon, designed to monitor deep space radio anomalies and microwave fluctuations. The program was shuttered within 6 months. The official explanation: insufficient results. But internal memos told a different story. One of the researchers suffered a complete psychological break after claiming to have communicated with the void. He was institutionalized, and his family was moved into witness protection. That man's name? Dr. Alton Kessler, Ethan's father. The revelation shook everything. Neela had assumed Ethan's obsession with the cold spot was just a quirk of his academic interest, something he stumbled onto through data and theory. But now it was clear. This ran in the family. Ethan didn't find the cold spot by accident. He'd been chasing it his entire life, following breadcrumbs his father had been forced to leave behind. Was that why Ethan had encrypted his files? To protect secrets passed down in silence? Or was it a warning? And why had he never spoken publicly about his father's breakdown? There were too many questions and far too few answers. It was around this time that a new player entered the picture, Dr. Yasmin Rojas, a visiting cosmologist from Caltech who meant to have known Ethan during a summer program years ago. She reached out to Neela after hearing about the missing scientist from a mutual contact. At first, she seemed genuinely concerned. She shared a few old photos, spoke about Ethan's early curiosity in the concept of universal bleed-through, and even handed over an old email Ethan had sent her 6 months before his disappearance. In it, Ethan asked cryptically, "Do you remember the crater in Bolivia?" The signals matching again. They were right all along. When Neela asked what it meant, Yasmin shrugged it off, said Ethan had always been dramatic. But something about her felt off. She dodged specific questions, always deflected when asked how she really knew Ethan, and seemed unusually fixated on retrieving the files that had been deleted. She kept pushing Neela to recreate the cold spot maps. When Hal did a quick background check on her, it turned up nothing suspicious. On paper, she was a decorated academic. But her recent whereabouts were vague. There were gaps in her digital presence. Missing months. It was subtle, but unsettling. The tension started pulling the team apart. Hal was convinced Yasmin was working for someone else. Neela wanted to believe in her, especially since Yasmin offered access to a private observatory in the Nevada desert, a site with equipment powerful enough to simulate Ethan's spectral scans. They needed that data. But could they trust the source? In this kind of story, the real danger often hides behind the people who seem helpful. And if Yasmin wasn't who she claimed to be, what exactly was her endgame? At the same time, another bizarre event unfolded. A small ham radio community in rural Oregon reported picking up a high-frequency signal that repeated the same numbers every evening at 3:17 a.m. Pacific Time. The sequence was always identical. After some digging, Hal discovered that the numbers matched spatial coordinates that drifted slowly each night, as if following a trajectory. The endpoint? Directly aligned with the cold spot's current location. But even more disturbing was the fact that the signal originated from within the U.S., somewhere in the Four Corners region. How was that possible? How could a cold spot frequency be echoing from Earth? That was when Neela decided they had no choice but to go to the source, to follow Ethan's last known path through South America to the crater in Bolivia he'd referenced in the email. It was a volcanic basin that had long been rumored among local villagers to be cursed. No birds flew over it. Compass readings went haywire. And every so often, the ground would vibrate, not from seismic activity, but something else. Something rhythmic, like breathing. As Neela packed her things, she noticed something strange in her apartment. Her journals, where she scribbled Ethan's timeline and sketches of cold spot symmetry, were missing. Not misplaced.
Gone.
Replaced with a crisp manila folder containing satellite photos. But not from the cold spot. These were images of the crater. The last one showed something that made her skin crawl, a faint heat signature at the very bottom of the basin, glowing faintly beneath the surface, perfectly circular. At the top of the folder was a sticky note with a single phrase, written in the same red marker as before. "It's already here." And just like that, everything shifted. Ethan wasn't running from something far away. He wasn't even trying to cross into another universe. He was trying to keep something out of ours. As Neela prepared for her journey to Bolivia, still reeling from the ominous message and the disturbing satellite image, she made a quick stop in Washington, D.C. to meet with Hal one last time. They needed to synchronize their findings, plan contingencies, and finalize access to the encrypted cold spot server backups still housed in a secured academic archive. But when she arrived at his townhouse just outside Georgetown, Hal wasn't answering his phone. That wasn't like him. Paranoid by nature, Hal never went anywhere without leaving a digital footprint. His last GPS ping was from his home just hours ago. The front door was locked. Neela rang the bell again. Still nothing. She started to feel that gnawing sensation in her gut, the kind that starts low and coils upward, where fear masquerades as logic. Finally, she used the emergency key Hal once gave her in case something ever got weird, and stepped inside. The lights were off, but his laptop was still running on the kitchen table, open to a satellite map of the Atacama Desert. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual were the scratch marks on the hardwood floor near the back window, scuff patterns that suggested someone had been dragged. Hal was gone. No note. No sign of struggle beyond the faint trails on the floor. But Neela knew immediately that whatever or whoever had been following her had now moved on to him. She called the police, but the response was predictably bureaucratic. No signs of forced entry, no official missing persons alert until 48 hours had passed. It was clear she was on her own. But as she sat down at Hal's terminal, hoping to salvage something from the data he'd been piecing together, she noticed a folder on his desktop she hadn't seen before. It was labeled Glass Horizon Unpublished. Inside was a lone video file, timestamped 2:14 a.m. the night before. Hal was in frame, visibly shaken, whispering into the camera like he didn't want to wake someone. "Neela," he said, barely audible over the background hum of what sounded like interference. "You were right. The cold spot isn't a remnant. It's an opening. It's been opening for years, widening. And the signal they're tracking? It's not just data. It's a countdown. I've seen the pattern. It loops every 37 hours. We thought it was background radiation, random cosmic noise. It's not. It's structured. It's a message." His voice broke then. "But it's not from them. It's from us." And then the video cut to static. Neela was frozen in place. Whatever Hal had uncovered, it was big enough to make him vanish, just like Ethan. But what did he mean by "from us"? Had someone else already breached the cold spot? Or worse, had Ethan succeeded in making contact? Before she could spiral deeper into the implications, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Ethan's younger sister, Mara, who worked as a medical tech in New Mexico. She and Ethan had barely spoken in recent years, but Mara had recently gone back through some of his old things stored at their childhood home. She'd found something, an old cassette tape buried inside a hollowed-out physics textbook, along with a Polaroid of Ethan and a group of unknown people standing in front of what looked like a scorched crater. Behind them was a white panel truck with no plates and a rusted symbol on the side, 3 concentric circles, intersected by a jagged black line. Mara thought it was just an old college prank until the previous night, when she received a call from an unknown number. A distorted voice had simply said, "He's not lost. He's hiding. Don't help her." Then the call cut out. This changed everything. Someone, possibly multiple someones, knew what Neela was doing and were now reaching out to Ethan's family to stop her. But more importantly, there was a second crater, one she'd never seen before, and a group of people whose identities were completely unknown. Had Ethan been part of a secret experiment? Was this the Bolivia crater, or another one entirely? Hal had hinted at a pattern, a widening breach. And if there were multiple craters, could the cold spot be the result of multiple entry points merging over time? Mara agreed to ship the tape and photo to Neela's contact in Nevada, where they'd be analyzed for any potential clues. But just hours after she made that call, her apartment was broken into. Nothing was stolen, but her laptop was shattered and her phone was missing. When Neela reached her again, Mara was terrified. She said a man in a white coat had knocked on her door earlier in the day, claiming to be a city inspector. She didn't think much of it until she caught him outside later, staring up at her window, unmoving. Neela now realized the net was closing fast. Someone was watching everyone connected to Ethan, anyone who could possibly lead to the truth. But worse still, new data coming in from the observatory in Nevada showed a shift in the cold spot's thermal signature. It had begun to pulse. Not in a way that suggested natural fluctuation, but in a pattern that mimicked a biological rhythm. A heartbeat. Faint, but unmistakable. She forwarded the data to a former NASA astrophysicist she once interned with, hoping for a rational explanation, but he didn't respond. Instead, his assistant called back 3 hours later in a panic. He said he couldn't be involved, the assistant stammered. He said the same pattern showed up in 1985. They covered it up then, too. He warned that if the pulse stabilizes, we may not be able to close it again. The assistant hung up before Neela could ask more. That night, she received another package. This time, it wasn't anonymous. It was postmarked from Chile, with Ethan's name on the return address. Inside was a small journal, worn and water-damaged. Scrawled across the first page in Ethan's handwriting were just 3 words. Don't trust Yasmin. The implication was impossible to ignore. Neela had already suspected Yasmin's motives, but Ethan's warning, postmarked from a location he shouldn't have been able to reach, suggested something far more sinister. And if Yasmin wasn't just a misdirection, what if she was the one who orchestrated everything from the start? The answers were no longer buried in data or cosmic theory. They were hidden in human hands, some grasping for truth, others trying desperately to erase it. And as Neela boarded her flight to Bolivia with Ethan's journal tucked under her arm, she couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger wasn't on the other side of the cold spot. It was already walking among them. The air in Bolivia was thin and sharp, like it had been filtered through stone and silence for centuries. The moment Neela stepped off the plane in La Paz, something in her gut shifted. It wasn't just the altitude, it was the weight of the place, the eyes she couldn't see, but somehow felt. Locals moved quietly around the small airport terminal, giving her a wide berth without ever making eye contact. Her ride, a trusted connection Hal had arranged months earlier through a mutual academic contact, never showed. Instead, a short, middle-aged man in a dusty windbreaker approached, holding a sign that simply read Rojas. Not Neela's name, but Yasmin's. Her instinct screamed. She backed away, clutching Ethan's journal tighter, and pretended not to see him. The man stood still, watching her with a blank expression as she slipped into the nearest taxi, offering double fare to take her to her hotel in the city without stops. He didn't speak a word during the drive, but glanced nervously into the rearview mirror more times than Neela could count. By the time she reached her hotel, a modest lodge on the edge of the old district, her hands were shaking. Every sound felt amplified. She couldn't tell if it was the altitude or the creeping sense that her presence here was known and unwelcome. The room was sparse but clean, with a window that overlooked a dark alley and a single bulb overhead that flickered every few minutes. She locked the door, then wedged a chair beneath the knob for good measure. That night, as she lay fully clothed on top of the sheets, trying to decode more of Ethan's journal by lamplight, she thought she heard footsteps outside her window. Slow. Deliberate. She didn't move. Didn't breathe. Just listened. The footsteps stopped. A soft tapping followed, 3 knocks. Then silence. Morning came like a relief she didn't trust. The alley was empty. No prints in the dust. Nothing disturbed. She told herself it had to be a drunk passerby. Or maybe a dream. But she didn't believe it. Not really. Still, she had work to do. She had arranged to meet a local geologist, Dr. Emilio Vargas, who had studied the volcanic basin Ethan mentioned in his email. Emilio had been reluctant over email but agreed to meet her at a cafe near the university, citing unusual seismic phenomena he had recorded in the crater over the past 6 months, pulses that didn't match any known volcanic activity. Neela arrived early, ordered black coffee, and waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Finally, she received a message on her burner phone. No name, just a photo. It was Emilio's ID badge, covered in blood, lying on cracked pavement. Beneath it, a single line of text. He asked too many questions. The world tilted. Neela's mouth went dry. She grabbed her bag, stuffed Ethan's journal deep into it, and slipped out the back of the cafe without paying. Her mind raced. Had someone been watching her emails? Listening to her calls? How many people had already been hurt or silenced? And why? She ducked into a bookstore down the street, hid between 2 dusty shelves, and tried to breathe. Her body was rigid, her heartbeat in her throat. She felt exposed, hunted. No longer a researcher chasing a mystery, but a target marked by it. She had crossed a line. The cold spot wasn't just a puzzle anymore, it was a secret someone would kill to protect. And now she was alone. Later that day, as she reviewed the final pages of Ethan's journal in a corner booth of a dimly lit bar, the darkness deepened. Ethan had written about the crater in more detail than Neela expected, about how it hummed beneath his feet, how electronic equipment failed within minutes of being inside the rim, and how his watch once counted backwards for nearly 11 seconds while standing near its center. But the most chilling passage was a sketch of a symbol, 3 concentric circles, jagged line, same as the truck in the Polaroid, and beneath it, the words, "The doorway is not found. It finds you." He described waking up in places he didn't remember, falling asleep, feeling time skip, and hearing faint voices not in his ears, but in his bones. And in the margins of the page, in hurried, almost desperate script, Yasmin knew. She was there.
She told me it would be safe.
A wave of nausea hit Neela. Her vision blurred. A crashing realization settled in her chest. Yasmin hadn't been chasing Ethan's work. She'd been involved in it from the beginning. But why was she pretending otherwise? What had she done to him? And how much of what Neela believed up to this point had been manipulated? There was no one left to trust. Even Marcus, who had once seemed like a grounded ally, had gone silent since she left the States. Emails bounced back. His phone disconnected. It was like the ground had dropped out from beneath her, and she was falling further and faster with every new piece of truth she uncovered. That night, as the wind howled through the narrow streets and flickering street lamps cast jittery shadows on the sidewalk, Neela returned to her hotel and found her room door ajar. Her stomach turned to ice. She knew she had locked it, chair still wedged beneath the knob. But the door was open just wide enough to be deliberate. She stepped inside, heart pounding, and was met with silence. The room appeared untouched, except for the bed. On the pillow was a cassette tape. No note, no case.
Just the tape.
Her hands trembling, she slipped it into her recorder and pressed play. At first, just static. Then a voice, Ethan's. Barely above a whisper. "If you're hearing this, I don't know if I made it. I was wrong, Neela. It's not about crossing over. It's about waking them up." It was what she heard faintly in the background of the tape. Not static. Not wind. A low, rhythmic pulse. Like a heartbeat. And it was getting louder. The rain had started without warning, pouring down in thick, aggressive sheets as Neela stood at the edge of the volcanic basin, staring into the yawning abyss that had drawn Ethan, and now her, across half the world. The sky was a swirling gray bruise, the kind that felt more like an omen than weather, and the dirt beneath her boots was slick with ash and ancient soot. She gripped Ethan's journal so tightly, the leather left an imprint in her palm. This was it. The place he'd written about. The anomaly. The doorway. But nothing about it looked unusual, just a quiet crater surrounded by loose rock, low fog, and silence, so absolute it was almost mocking. And yet, standing there, her skin prickled, her breath caught in her throat, and her heart, her actual heartbeat, stumbled against something invisible, like it recognized the place before her brain could. She didn't realize she wasn't alone until she heard someone say her name. The voice was soft, familiar. She turned, breath-catching, and there he was, Marcus. Wet, ragged, and looking like he hadn't slept in days. His jacket hung off one shoulder, mud streaking his jeans, eyes sunken but alive. At first, relief flooded Neela's chest. He was alive. He hadn't abandoned her after all. But that joy shattered the moment he spoke again. "I told you not to come here." The words weren't angry. They were afraid. She didn't understand. "You're the one who, Marcus. I emailed you everything. You never responded. I thought." He cut her off with a sharp gesture. "I couldn't. They were watching me." "Neela, you think this is about a cold spot? It's not. That's just the excuse. The science, the data, it was always a smokescreen. This place, this anomaly, it's not natural." And Ethan didn't discover it. He uncovered it. The rain hissed louder, like it was trying to drown out the conversation. Neela took a step back. Her thoughts scrambled to fit the new pieces together. "What are you talking about?" "Then who what? Found it first." Marcus hesitated. Then finally, the real twist hit like a punch to the chest. "Yasmin." Neela froze. Marcus continued, his voice cracking. Yasmin was never just his partner. She was part of a team, off the books, privately funded, researchers, occultists, ex-military. They weren't mapping radiation or gravitational waves. They were looking for access points, locations where the veil between realities thins. They believed this place, it wasn't a phenomenon. It was a breach. A leak. And Yasmin. She led them here years before Ethan ever arrived. Ethan was just their test subject. They needed someone smart enough to figure it out, but expendable enough to lose. Neela staggered back, her breath gone. Ethan hadn't discovered the cold spot. He'd been used to activate it. Her mind reeled as she replayed every interaction with Yasmin. The way she had conveniently found her at the observatory. The way she'd stayed just distant enough to avoid scrutiny, just helpful enough to seem trustworthy. Neela had believed she was chasing the same truth. But the whole time, Yasmin had been several moves ahead. Not following the clues, placing them. Guiding Neela deeper, using her grief and guilt to steer her right to the breach. Right to the endgame. She whispered, "Why me?" Marcus looked down. "Because of your family." A silence fell between them that was deeper than the crater. Neela's throat tightened. "What about my family?" He exhaled slowly, eyes filled with regret. "Your father was part of the same group. Before he disappeared, he was working with Yasmin. He helped design the equipment Ethan used. Your family wasn't collateral damage. They were participants. And when they tried to back out, something followed them home." The world twisted. Neela felt her knees buckle, but didn't fall. Her memories, once fragmented, began stitching themselves back together. Unexplainable dreams she had as a child, the way her father always looked over his shoulder, the strange symbols on his old notebooks she thought were doodles. It had all been connected, hidden in plain sight. A secret her family had buried so deep even she forgot it existed. But now it was awake again. Before she could speak, a low rumble rose from the crater. Not thunder, not an earthquake, but something older. Hungrier. The earth beneath them pulsed like it had a heartbeat of its own. Marcus turned pale, his eyes locking onto hers. "You need to leave. Right now." Neela shook her head, a strange clarity washing over her. "It's too late." Because as she stared into the swirling mist at the base of the crater, she saw a shape, a silhouette. Someone or something was already climbing out. And it knew her name. The figure in the crater's depths grew clearer with each heartbeat, a shadow rising from the mist like something pulled from a nightmare, not quite human but not entirely monstrous either. It moved slowly, deliberately, its form blurring at the edges as though reality itself was bending around it. Neela's mind raced, panic clawing at her chest as she realized she had nowhere to run. No way out. The thought of climbing the steep slopes of the crater was laughable now, especially with the storm closing in and the ground beneath her shaking. She wanted to scream, but the breath caught in her throat. Marcus was already moving, backing away from the edge, his eyes wide with terror as he muttered under his breath in a language she didn't recognize. She turned to him, desperation in her voice. "What is that? What the hell is happening?" But Marcus only shook his head, his face drained of color. "It's them. They're coming. This wasn't supposed to happen." Neela's heart stuttered as a sickening realization began to form in her chest. You knew what this place was, and you never told me. You used me." "No," Marcus interrupted, his voice cracking. "I didn't use. I thought you were safe, that I could keep you away from all this." "Safe?" Neela laughed bitterly, tears burning in her eyes. "Safe? After everything that's happened? After everything you've kept from me? How could you?" Her voice wavered as the weight of his betrayal finally crushed her. He wasn't just some innocent bystander. He had known, deep down, what they were walking into. He had lied, just like everyone else. Just like Yasmin. As the shape in the crater grew clearer, it began to take on a more distinct form, taller, its limbs unnaturally long, its head tilting at impossible angles as if studying them. Something in Neela's gut told her it wasn't just observing them, it was waiting. Waiting for something she couldn't yet understand. "I didn't have a choice," Marcus whispered, stepping toward her, his hand outstretched in desperation. "I thought we could stop it, Neela. We were trying to contain it. You don't know what I sacrificed to keep you out of it. To keep you from following me into this hell. But now it's too late. Neela. I swear." Neela staggered back, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps as she struggled to comprehend what he was saying. She had trusted Marcus. She had trusted him with her father's legacy, with her own search for answers. And now, as the figure in the crater stepped closer, slowly, unnervingly so, she realized the extent of his involvement. He hadn't just been a bystander. He had been an accomplice. Not to Ethan's death, but to the darkness that had been unleashed. The thing now moving toward them wasn't the result of an accident or a miscalculation. It was the culmination of years of research, years of exploration, years of planning. It had always been inevitable, and she had been dragged into it by people she thought she could trust. Her voice trembled with a mix of rage and fear. "So, what now? You're going to tell me it's all for some greater good? That this is for the truth?" Marcus swallowed hard. "We can't stop it anymore, Neela."
I'm sorry.
"But we have a choice. You and me, together. We can go, we can get out, disappear, leave this place behind, and the world will forget about all of it. This never happened. They won't even come looking for us." The words hung in the air like smoke, thick and heavy, but they were wrong. Every cell in her body screamed in opposition. She couldn't turn away now. No matter how terrifying, no matter how dangerous it was, there was no more turning back. The truth, her father's secret, Ethan's research, her own place in it all, had to come out. No matter the cost. But as she stared at Marcus, she saw the desperation in his eyes. He wasn't trying to save her. He was trying to save himself. He was pleading with her to run, to leave, to let it go. He couldn't protect her anymore. The choice had already been made for them both. The breach was happening. The thing in the crater was rising, and it wasn't going to stop until it had claimed whatever it wanted from them. "I'm not leaving," Neela said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "I'm staying. And you're going to help me. You don't get to walk away from this, Marcus. Not after everything." His face crumbled as if he had been punched in the gut. "You don't understand, Neela. You can't understand. If you stay, you'll be part of it. You'll become..." His words faltered as he reached for her again, but this time she stepped back, her body rigid with anger and fear. "You're wrong," she said, her voice rising in defiance. "I'm going to stop it. I'm going to finish what Ethan started, even if it kills me." You think this is about you? About your mistakes? This is bigger than all of us. And I won't be some pawn in your game. I won't let you bury the truth. For a long moment, there was silence between them. The sound of the storm raging around them, the hum of the earth beneath their feet, and the terrifying shape in the crater, all of it pressing in on her, urging her to make a decision. The weight of the truth was suffocating. But so was the fear of what might happen if she stayed, if she kept going, if she let herself get too close to the edge of the abyss. Then, Marcus spoke again, his voice barely a whisper, tinged with regret. Then you need to make a choice, Neela. Because if you stay, if you keep digging, they'll make sure you don't leave. No one who comes here, no one who finds it, ever gets to walk away. Before she could reply, the figure in the crater stepped fully into view, towering above them, its face, if it could be called that, unreadable, its eyes now fixed on Neela as if it had already decided what it wanted from her. The ground shook harder, and the storm seemed to press in around them as though the world itself was holding its breath. Marcus's eyes widened in horror, and he stepped back slowly, a hand raised as if to shield himself from the thing emerging from the depths of the earth. Neela, you don't know what you're up against. You don't know what it's. A low growl vibrated from the thing in the crater, cutting him off. Neela didn't look away. She wasn't afraid anymore. She had no choice. There was no escape. The truth was right in front of her. But what would it cost her? Would she lose everything, just like everyone else before her? Would it consume her too? The answers were buried beneath the rising storm and the dark thing moving toward them. And Neela knew, deep down, the hardest part of this journey had only just begun. The earth trembled again, but this time, it wasn't the storm or the shape emerging from the crater. It was something worse, something far more dangerous. Neela's heart pounded in her chest, the rhythm matching the growing vibrations beneath her feet. She turned toward Marcus, hoping for some sign of clarity, but what she saw on his face wasn't fear. It was panic, pure and unfiltered, as though he realized the full extent of what they had unleashed. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could say anything, the ground erupted beneath them, and a figure emerged from the shadows. At first, Neela thought it was another one of those unnatural shapes from the depths, but then the figure spoke her name. Neela. Her breath caught in her throat as she turned, eyes widening in shock. Standing in front of her wasn't a strange creature from another world. It was Yasmin. But the Yasmin who stood there wasn't the same woman she'd known, the one she'd trusted. This version was cold, eyes hard as ice, her face drawn in an expression of pure disdain. Her hands were clasped together in front of her, as if she was prepared for whatever was coming next, but there was a weight to her presence, a chilling aura that made Neela's skin crawl. What the hell is this? Neela breathed, stepping back instinctively. Yasmin's lips curled into a cruel smile. You really didn't know, did you? She said, her voice laced with bitterness. You thought you were uncovering some grand conspiracy, thinking you were special, that you had a right to know the truth.
But you're just a pawn, Neela.
You were always just a pawn. Neela's heart sank as the weight of the words settled into her bones. What are you talking about? What have you done? Yasmin stepped closer, her eyes flicking to Marcus, who had gone. But there was more. She could see it in Yasmin's eyes. A hunger, a lust for something she couldn't quite put into words. And then it hit her. This wasn't just about power for power's sake. This was about using the very fabric of reality itself to manipulate time, space, and even life. They had figured out how to bend the rules of the universe. The shape in the crater, the storm raging around them, it was a product of their experiments, a rip in the space-time continuum that no one was supposed to tamper with. And Neela was the key to it all. Silent, standing motionless behind Neela. He seemed to shrink, suddenly smaller than before, like a boy caught in a lie. Neela's mind was racing, the pieces of the puzzle slipping through her fingers, and then Yasmin's next words hit her like a punch to the gut. You were right, Neela, she said with a sickening sense of satisfaction. You were so close. Your father's research, it wasn't about saving the world. It was about controlling it. About bending the laws of the universe to our will. And you're part of that plan. You always were. Neela took a step back, her legs shaking beneath her as the truth began to sink in.
No.
This isn't possible. Yasmin's eyes darkened. You think your father was just some eccentric scientist?
No.
He was one of us. He worked with them, with the others who came before him. This is bigger than anything you could have imagined, Neela. And you've been in the middle of it the whole time. The realization hit her like a wave crashing over her. Yasmin, Marcus, even her father, they had all been involved in something far darker than she had ever believed. This wasn't just about the truth of the universe. This was about control, about power beyond comprehension. The message Ethan had left for her was a warning, not a plea for help. She was part of the system, not an outsider looking in. Her stomach churned as she realized what Yasmin was really saying. They didn't need to stop this. They needed her to unlock it. And Marcus? He wasn't the man she thought he was. He was just as much a part of this as Yasmin, just as willing to sacrifice anyone to see this through. Her trust in him shattered in an instant. Why didn't you tell me? Neela demanded, her voice trembling with rage and disbelief. All this time, you've been lying to me. You used me, Marcus. You used me like I was just some tool. Marcus didn't look at her, his eyes fixed on the ground as if ashamed, as if he was already too far gone to help. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words never came. Instead, there was a sound, a low, rumbling noise coming from the crater. Neela's eyes snapped toward it just in time to see something shift beneath the surface. The figure was closer now, more distinct, its form becoming sharper, more defined. Yasmin's smile widened. Don't worry. It won't be long now. You'll understand soon enough, Neela. The universe will be ours. Neela's heart skipped a beat. She was too close now, too deep in the mess they had created. The walls were closing in. There was no escape. They had played her from the start, and now, they were about to use her for something far more sinister than she had ever imagined. But there was one thing she couldn't understand. Why her? What made her the key to unlocking this nightmare? Was it just because of her father's work? Or was it something deeper? Something connected to her very blood, her very existence? Her mind raced as the figure in the crater continued to rise, its form growing larger, more menacing with every passing second. The storm around them intensified, the winds howling as if nature itself was warning them to stop. But Yasmin was unmoved, her eyes cold and calculating. She took a step toward Neela, her voice a whisper, barely audible over the chaos around them. You're not going anywhere, Neela. We've come too far. And you've already made your choice. The ground beneath them cracked open, and in that instant, Neela understood. It wasn't just about saving the world. It wasn't even about understanding the universe. It was about domination, control. She had been a part of it from the very beginning, and now it was too late to turn back. But what if there was a way out? What if there was one last chance to stop it all before it was too late? With her mind racing and her heart pounding, Neela knew the stakes were higher than ever before. The truth was slipping through her fingers, and the people she thought she could trust had all betrayed her. The game had changed. Now, the question was, could she still stop it? Or would she become another pawn in the game of universal domination? The storm was deafening now, a continuous roar that vibrated through Neela's bones as she stood facing Yasmin. The figure in the crater had fully emerged, its form unmistakably alien but eerily human in some strange way. It loomed over them, a colossal shadow against the storm's violent backdrop, pulsating as though it was alive. Neela's heart raced, her mind a chaotic whirl of questions, confusion, and fear. She couldn't move, could barely breathe. Everything she thought she understood about her life, about her father's work, had shattered in an instant, leaving only a gaping void filled with lies and betrayal. Yasmin stood next to the monstrous figure, watching Neela with a look of cruel satisfaction, as if she were the final piece in some twisted puzzle. It's too late, Neela, she said, her voice calm, almost serene. The power we've unlocked, the forces we've touched, it's beyond anything you can comprehend. You were never meant to stop this. You were meant to start it. Neela's thoughts swirled, the pieces of the mystery falling into place, but not fully connecting. She was so close, but it felt like every answer only led to more questions. She remembered the research her father had done, the anomalies, the inexplicable readings that had seemed like a roadmap to something otherworldly. She recalled the cryptic messages he'd left behind, the warnings from people who had disappeared. It had all been connected to this moment, this catastrophe. But there was something more, something Yasmin hadn't counted on, something Neela hadn't realized until now. Why me? Neela finally managed to ask, her voice trembling with a mix of fury and desperation. Why was I chosen? What do I have to do with any of this? Yasmin's smile tightened. Because you're the key, Neela. You always have been. Your father's experiments, his research, they weren't just about understanding the universe. They were about shaping it. And you were his final equation. The one that ties it all together. The weight of her words pressed down on Neela's chest, suffocating her. Her father's legacy was not one of discovery, it was one of domination. He had worked with forces he couldn't control, and now, those same forces were tearing the world apart. But it was too late for regrets. Yasmin was already moving forward, her eyes locked onto Neela with terrifying certainty. Suddenly, Marcus stepped forward, his face pale, but his eyes dark with resolve. This is bigger than you think, Neela, he said, his voice strained. We didn't have a choice. No one did. They've been controlling everything for years, manipulating the timeline, manipulating us. We thought we could stop it, but we were wrong. Neela's breath hitched as she looked at him, the betrayal in his eyes far worse than anything Yasmin had said. What are you talking about? She demanded, but deep down, she already knew the truth. Marcus wasn't just a bystander in all of this. He had been a part of it from the start. He was another pawn in the game. The ones who came before us, Marcus continued, his voice hollow. They knew this day would come. The people who've been pulling the strings, they don't want to just alter the fabric of reality. They want to own it. They've been using us, your father, me, Yasmin, even you, to bring us to this point. And once it's done, we'll all be gone. Erased from existence. Neela's stomach turned as the true horror of what had been happening slowly sank in. This wasn't just a race for knowledge or control. It was about erasing everything she knew, everything that made up her world. Everything she was. With a sudden surge of clarity, Neela realized the key wasn't her father's work. It was her connection to it. Her very existence had been tied to the forces they had meddled with. Her father had known it, had planned it, and now Yasmin and Marcus were both trapped in the same web. She wasn't just a pawn. She was the catalyst, the missing piece that would allow the destruction of everything. The storm around them intensified, the winds howling, as if the universe itself were protesting. The figure in the crater shifted again, its form flickering like static on a broken screen. Neela's pulse quickened as she realized the truth. The figure wasn't a being from another world, it was them. It was a distorted version of everything they had manipulated, a monstrous reflection of their desires, and it was feeding on the chaos they had created. Stop, Neela whispered, her voice barely audible over the roar. Stop this. There's still time. We can fix it. I can fix it. But it was too late. The air grew thick, suffocating, and the figure from the crater stretched out toward her. It felt as though reality itself was bending, twisting, folding in on itself. And then the final twist came, one that Neela hadn't anticipated. The ground beneath them cracked open once more, and a blinding light filled the space, spilling out like liquid fire. A new figure emerged from the light, one that Neela didn't recognize at first, but whose presence immediately sent a shiver down her spine. It was another version of herself. But this version was different. It wasn't human. It was something far more primal, a reflection of the darkness that had been unlocked in the fabric of the universe. Her other self stepped forward, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. You are always going to be the one, the figure said in a voice that echoed in Neela's mind, its words crawling under her skin like a disease. But you didn't understand the price. The storm, the figure in the crater, the chaos, it was all leading to this moment. Neela's chest tightened as the reality of what was happening fully dawned on her. She wasn't the one who would stop it. She was the one who would complete it. The universe had been waiting for her. And now, she had no choice but to decide whether to become the key to their destruction or the one who would usher in the new reality. With every ounce of willpower she had left, Neela closed her eyes, her heart pounding, and made her choice. But as she did, the ground shook again, violently this time, and the universe itself seemed to hold its breath. The choice would not be hers alone to make. And that, Neela realized, was the final twist of all. The story wasn't over. It had only just begun. Neela stood at the edge of the crater, the storm finally dying down, its howling winds giving way to a strange, unsettling silence. The glowing figure of her other self, the twisted, primal version of who she had been, flickered and vanished into the air, leaving nothing but the echo of its voice. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze in time, the weight of the events pressing down on her chest, suffocating her, and yet there was a profound stillness that felt almost peaceful. The devastation of the past days, the betrayal, the secrets, the fractured reality, had led her here, to this moment of clarity. She wasn't sure how she felt. A part of her wanted to collapse, to scream, to let out the torrent of emotions that had built up inside her over the past months. But another part, the part that had fought so hard to stay human amidst the chaos, felt something else: acceptance. The universe, it seemed, was never meant to be understood. Her father had spent his life chasing answers, trying to unlock the very fabric of existence, but in the end, he had only created more questions. And now, Neela realized, that was the true nature of the universe, a constantly shifting, unknowable force. She wasn't meant to control it, to bend it to her will. She was meant to witness it, to live within its vast mystery, and perhaps to find peace with it. Marcus had disappeared. She didn't know where he had gone or what had become of him, but she could feel his absence now, like a hole in the space around her. Yasmin, too, was gone, lost to whatever forces she had awakened. For a moment, Neela almost felt a pang of sympathy. Yasmin, who had once been her ally, had been consumed by ambition, by the same hunger for control that had twisted everything they had been trying to fix. But that wasn't her fight anymore. She couldn't let it be. Neela had fought for so long against the idea of becoming like them, of becoming something twisted and monstrous in her pursuit of answers, and now she understood that the only way forward was to embrace the unknown, to let go of the need to have all the answers. The crater itself had calmed, its violent energy dissipating, leaving behind a scar in the earth that would never heal. As Neela stood there, she could feel the weight of everything that had happened pressing in on her: her father's work, the mysterious messages, the threats that had chased her at every turn. She had thought, for so long, that she could fix it, that she could undo what had been done. But in the end, she realized that nothing could be undone. The universe was not a puzzle to be solved. It was an enigma to be lived with. As she turned away from the ruins, her mind was still swirling with the memories of everything that had transpired. The people she had loved, the people who had betrayed her, and the strange, unfathomable forces that had been pulling the strings all along. She could never truly escape them. They would linger in her mind forever, just as they would in the fabric of reality itself. The universe was bigger than she had ever imagined, filled with mysteries that no one would ever fully understand. And maybe that was okay. She walked away from the crater, from the storm, her heart heavy but no longer burdened by the need for closure. There were still unanswered questions, still things that didn't make sense. But she had learned something invaluable. Not everything had to make sense. Not everything could be controlled. The universe was far too vast, too complex, for anyone to truly comprehend. And maybe, just maybe, that was the most powerful lesson she could have learned. But as Neela disappeared into the horizon, a small part of her couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't over. The universe had given her no answers, but it had given her a question: what would she do next? And that, Neela realized, was the true test. Not the answers she had found, but the choices she would make with the knowledge she now possessed. As she took another step, a low rumble echoed through the earth, a faint warning, a promise, or perhaps just the wind. The universe was still out there, waiting. And it wasn't finished with her yet. The final twist, she realized, wasn't in the answers. It was in the questions that lingered, unanswered, and impossible to ignore. The universe wasn't a cold spot at all. It was alive and it was watching. And it would always be watching.